Hello and welcome to another Teach Me to Code screencast. This is Chuck Wood, or Charles Max Wood, and today I'm going to go over the Gem Bundler. The Gem Bundler is a library that was written by Yehuda Katz and Carl Laresh of Engine Yard, and basically what it does is it resolves dependencies between our gems. Here's an example right here. If you follow my mouse, it talks about the gem resolution, and what happens is if you load a library that has a dependency, and then you load another library that has a different dependency on the same gem, sometimes what happens is you can actually have a runtime error that results because one gem has a narrower requirement than the other. And this is the example they give. So you have active merchant 1.4.2, and it depends on active support that's greater than 2.3.2. So what happens is when your application loads this up, what it does is it says, okay, well, I'm going to load up active merchant, and I'm going to go ahead and load up the newest library that meets active merchant's active support requirement, which on this machine is active support 3.0.pre. Then what happens is it comes down here and it tries to load up Rails version 2.3.4, and Rails 2.3.4 requires active support version 2.3.4, and it gives you this error because active support 3.0.pre is already activated for active merchant. So what the gem bundler does is it actually goes through all of the gems that you list for it, and we'll show you how to do that in just a moment. And it looks at all of the dependencies, and then it finds the dependencies that will work for all of the gems that you're requiring within your application. So in order to get the gem bundler, what you do is you go ahead and, here we'll just clear this, is you do a gem install bundler. And that'll go out and it'll connect to Gem Cutter, I believe. And it'll pull down the latest bundler code, which is version 0.9. So, sudo gem install bundler. Since I'm on a Mac and I want it to install to the system gems repository and not the local one. Oh, and if you're running into this error, I hate editing, so I'm not going to. If you run into this error, you can actually do a sudo gem I think it's upgrade -- system update. There we go. And this may take a minute, so I may actually just edit this and come back. Okay, so now that we have it installed, what we can do is, and this is actually in a repository that I'm working on right now. This is a Rails app that I just started. So here we can do a bundle init, and what this does is it actually we have to install the gem now. Sudo gem install bundler. Alright, so now if we do bundle init, then what it'll do is it creates a gem file. Let's go ahead and open that up real quick. And what you'll see here is you'll just see a quick example of a gem file. What you see here, let's just make this a little larger here. There we go. So now you should be able to read that. So you see here that you have a source, and the source is Gem Cutter, and that's the default source, and that's just fine. What this line does, it's just a requirement for a gem, and what this line does is it actually pulls in the Rails gem and all of its dependencies. So it'll go out and it'll get the latest version, which I think is still 2.3.5 in Gem Cutter. So it'll go out and it'll pull that down, and it'll pull in active record and active support and all the stuff that you get with Rails. So it'll actually solve all those dependencies. If you want a specific version, what you can do is you actually just give it a second parameter, and you just give it like 2.3.5 or 2.3.4, and then it'll pull down that version and all of its dependencies. Let's say though, for example, that you want to get instead the latest Rails stuff directly from the GitHub repository. So what you can do is you can do git http github.com/rails/rails.git, and that's actually the path to the latest Rails repository. And what it'll do is it'll pull that into the bundled gems repository, and you have the very, very latest version of Rails. Another nice thing that you may have seen, this is an alternative to doing the config.gem in your Rails application. So sometimes what you'll do is you'll actually use config.gem to install specific libraries in your application depending on the environment. So for example, let's say you want to pull in RSpec, but you only want to pull it in when you're in your test environment. That's not hard to do. All you do is you can do there are a couple of ways to do it. You can do gem RSpec group test. Okay, and what that does is it just adds RSpec to the test group, and it's no longer in what's deemed as the default group, like Rails is. If you have a whole bunch, say you have like RSpec and Cucumber and WebRat, then what you can actually do is you can do this. You can do group test, and then you just give it a block. Gem RSpec, gem RSpec Rails, gem Cucumber, gem WebRat, and that'll add all of those to the test group. And then what you can do is you can actually install all of these gems in this application. So let's go back to the command line here. Let me there, that should be a little easier to read. Let's go ahead and install some of these gems, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tell it to install them before I do this, because this is an application that I'm actually in the process of working on, and I don't want edge rails on this. So let's just specify 2.3.5 here. So anyway, so once we're here, we can say, okay, we'll pull in all the gems without the test group. Okay, and what this will do is it'll go out to gemcutter.org, and it'll pull down all of the gems, which in our case is just the Rails. Oh, and RSpec. No, RSpec is part of the test group. So it'll just pull in Rails and all of its dependencies, and it'll actually put them in. So you can see here that what it's doing, it says from system gems. What that means is that I already have it installed, so it's just going to pull it in from system gems. If I didn't have it installed, then it would actually install it into a repository for the bundle, for the bundled gems. So once we have that going, let's go ahead and show you how to pull in some of the other gems here really quickly, or how to include them into your application. It does this by default from what I understand in Rails 3, but this isn't default behavior in Rails 2. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll just open up another shell here. Ruby, oh, let's make this so you can read it here. Ruby /podcast stats. Yeah, you can guess what that Rails application is. And then let's just open up this whole folder in TextMate. So I don't know how to make this any bigger. So I'm sorry about the drawer over here, but let's see. So we'll go ahead and open up the config environment.rb, and what we'll do is, oh yeah, it requires a few things in Rails 2, and I'm going to have to go ahead and look this up because I don't remember exactly how it works. Oh, here we go. Okay. So in Rails, using bundler with Rails 0.9, you have to make a few changes to boot, and those changes are in gist right here, the gist. So we'll just pull that up, and I'm just going to copy and paste because so let's see here. So we'll just pull up the repository, boot over here. We'll just add it in here real quick, and then the pre-initializer.rb. So we'll just always do that. Okay. So we'll go ahead and new file pre-initializer.rb. And so we'll just drop this in here. Save both. And then we should be good to go. Now, one other thing that I want to show you really quickly here is that if you do bundle install vendor, what this does is it does what bundle used to do, and that is that it actually vendors all of your gems. So in other words, it puts them into vendor gems under your Rails application. So we'll just go ahead and run this really quickly so that you can see it. And this may take a minute, but if we come down here to vendor, no, it hasn't done it yet. Let's see if this is here, done here. Okay, so it's done bundling over here, and you know, I'm sure it's gonna, okay. And you'll see here that I didn't give it the -- without test, and so it actually went out and it pulled in Cucumber, which I didn't already have, JSON Pure, Polyglot, Rack Test, Term ANSI Color, Treetop, and it'll pull in a few others here. But if we come down here and we look in vendor, you now see that we have bin, cache, doc, gems, and specifications. Plugins was already there. And so if we go ahead and look in the gems, you can see that we have these folders here that have the libraries in them. If you look in cache, this is actually really interesting. If you look in cache, you actually have the gem files right there. And again, those are only for the ones that weren't already in my system repositories. Bin is usually the executables and other scripts that it generates for you. We looked at gems and specifications. These are the gem spec files, and we'll probably do a future episode on how to create a gem and upload it to GemCutter. But the gem spec, all that is if you pull it up, it actually gives you all the information about the gem, including its where to require from. And I'm looking here, I don't know if it has any. Oh, here we go. Auto require, treetop. Yeah, here we go. Add runtime dependency, polyglot. So this is what's pulling in polyglot. So anyway, that's basically how it works if you vendor the gems. and then you can check them into your repository and have them that way. What I have typically done with this particular setup is I will actually check the cache into my repository and sometimes the specifications, but I won't check in gems, doc, or bin. And the reason is because on my machine it may build differently than it builds on my server. And so if I vendor all of these and check them in, and then I don't bundle them on the other machine and just assume that this will work, it doesn't always work. So that's just something to keep in mind. You're usually better off in this case with the newer version, just to not bother vendoring them, and instead what you can do is you can lock your gems. And what that does, here we'll just bundle lock, and what this does is it'll actually generate a gem file.lock. Here, let's close this just to make it easier to see. Bundle is now locked. So you see we have the gem file.lock, and this is actually a YAML file, and what it does is it specifies the versions of all of the dependencies that we have. So Rails, it's in group default, so these are the versions, and with our spec and some of these it's just saying greater than 0, but you have all of these different versions, and these are the versions that we actually have installed. So our spec version 1.3.0. So if I do a bundle install on another machine in this repository, it'll actually install these exact versions of these gems. Now I believe that's everything. There is one more thing that you can do. Oh wait, there is one more thing that I need to add before I am done, and that is, here, let's come back to this. In your Ruby application, you have to include this. Now I believe that this code that we just added here from this gist effectively does this for us. So it should actually, yeah, right here, see, it's extending the environment, and the pre-initializer is pulling in your bundle environment. So this is actually doing the work that it says to do. But if you're not running Rails, if you're running Sinatra or something like that, then you need this code right here under running the application, and you just copy this in above your gem, any of your requirements, and you can actually then just require whatever libraries you're going to use. You do need to keep in mind that if you do a bundle lock, that the bundler setup right here and the bundler require will again only pull in the gem versions that you've specified. So you'll need to do a bundler install. I believe you can also do right here a bundle check, and it will tell you if all of the gems dependencies are satisfied. And so if I hadn't run this and I'd done a bundle check, it probably would have told me right here that Cucumber wasn't there and JSON Pure wasn't there. One last thing that you can do is if you have a script, a Ruby script, you can do bundle exec Ruby and then the name of the script. So, and I don't have a script to show you at the moment, but what this will do is it'll actually use the information in the bundle's hidden folder, which is .bundle, and it's very explicit not to add that to your code repository so that it doesn't goof things up when you deploy it somewhere else, because that is actually an environment being server or machine specific. So you don't want to include that, but that also gets set up when you do your gem or your bundle install. So if you do a bundle exec Ruby and then your Ruby script, it will actually run it under the context of your bundled environment. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, you can email me at chuck@teachmetocode.com or at chuck@lostjungles.com. You can also follow me at charlesmaxwood.com. Thanks.
This screencast is sponsored by Jumpstart Lab. Jumpstart Lab offers private and corporate training in Ruby, Rails, and related technologies. They're experienced educators, not just good developers, and will get you going quickly. Courses can be scheduled in the U.S. or around the world, and curriculum customized to meet your needs. Learn more at jumpstartlab.com. This screencast is also sponsored by ClutterPad, the most awesome online project management and collaboration tool ever. Sign up now to get the chance to use it at www.clutterpad.com.
That was wonderful.
Bravo!
I loved that.
Oh, it was great.
Well, it was pretty good.
Well, it wasn't bad.
Well, there were parts of it that weren't very good, though.
It could have been a lot better.
I didn't really like it.
It was pretty terrible.
It was bad.
It was awful.
It was terrible.
Get him away!
Hey, boo!
Boo!